Start your wellness journey at Whole Foods Market, where it's Jumpstart January through the 16th. Stock up on supplements with some of the year's biggest savings. Plus, save on air-chilled organic boneless skinless chicken breasts, organic Honeycrisp apples, organic large Hass avocados, and more. And since Whole Foods Market is the only certified organic national grocer, it's easy to make them your wellness destination. Jumpstart your January now at Whole Foods Market.
Hello and welcome to The Price of Football, the show that looks at the money behind the beautiful game with me, Kevin Day, and him, Liverpool University's Kieran Maguire. And Kieran, people spread betting. I know we don't approve of betting on this show, but I know people were spread betting that we couldn't go 3 whole shows without a hangover. And I'm afraid we are going 3 whole shows without a hangover, mainly because we're recording this on Wednesday night, quite late Wednesday night, and I've just got home from work, and even I don't drink at work. Although I am drinking now. But does this work? Yeah, I suppose I am drinking at work.
It's just playing.
Yeah, but somebody asked me today, who's a fan of the pod, this is the floor manager in the show I'm working in, big fan of the pod, asked me whether you'd once ever drunk so much water that you got a hungover. Apparently it can happen, he says.
Yeah, it can. It can. Yeah, I've read stories.
Yeah, you've been in a lot of stories, Kieran. You've only read them. Later in the show, we'll hear from the Chief Executive of the Professional Footballers Association, Maheta Molango. Kieran went to chat to him. It's the man, of course, who succeeded Gordon Taylor after 40 years plus in the same role. And I think it's fair to say from Kieran's fascinating interview that Maheta has a slightly different approach than Gordon perhaps had at the end. But of course, it's news day and we do have some news. And unfortunately, Kieran, we start with 2 clubs who have had points deductions this week. Again, those of you who do like a small flutter will have won not very much money because Derby County were odds on to be included in this. But another Championship club has also had a points deduction, Kieran, as well.
Yes. So yesterday out came the news, which wasn't a huge surprise. I think this had been leaked / trailed from a variety of sources in respect of Derby County. Now, remember, Derby were given an automatic 12-point penalty for going into administration. And on top of that, they have now been given a further 9 points for exceeding the financial fair play limits. And they have agreed, we spoke about this, they've agreed not to appeal the original 12 points. On top of that, there is a potential 3-point deduction, though that is just ridiculously kicking a man when he's down, should they fail to pay the wages on time during the rest of this season. So it's 21 points. They still have a transfer embargo that they can't sign players on loans or for fees for the rest of this season. They've got a wage cap as well.
Jeez.
It doesn't leave very much for the rest of the season. I think you've got to give Derby County fans a lot of credit. All the feedback that I've had and the observations I've seen on social media is, well, it's still Derby County, it's still our club. We still love them, of course, as you would expect. And we're going to carry on following them for the rest of this season, home and away as best we can. And that's very laudable.
But it's a situation, Kieran, as we've discussed, unfortunately, so many times before, it's going to make it much harder to sell the club. I mean, this could take years to come back from, couldn't it? That's the problem here. And we're talking about essentially the mismanagement of one man that's punishing 40,000, 50,000 football fans, and it just leaves a terrible, terrible taste in the mouth, doesn't it?
It does, and it does go to show that when football clubs are acquired and treated as executive toys, as we've seen with Derby County and Mel Morris. And the trouble with toys is that people grow bored of them. And that's what happened there. His use of creative accounting didn't help. His decision to turn off the taps and put the club into administration has cost people jobs as well. And there were lots of warning flags that have been coming out from the club over a period of time. Derby fans feel that they've been treated harshly by the EFL. I think they've been treated in accordance with the rules by the EFL. From looking at the small print, and I know Derby fans will take issue with that, but it wasn't the EFL that failed to pay wages. It wasn't the EFL that had Derby increase the wages by a factor of 3. Triple the wages over 5 years without tripling the income and putting the club into a financially distressed position. So that's where we are with Derby. And then, so we're recording this on Wednesday evening, and a couple of hours ago, Reading were given it's either, some people are saying it's a 6-point deduction plus a potential threat of a further 6. Some people are describing it as a 12-point deduction, of which 6 have been suspended. So a lot depends upon your perspective of that. Reading have managed to clock up losses of £220 million in the last decade. And that's despite being in the Premier League for one season. That's despite 4 years of parachute payments. But their current owners do seem to have a cavalier attitude towards financial fair play. They were paying, I think it was something like £221 in wages for every £100 that came through the door. Crazy stuff. And in fact, it was only yesterday that they announced the signing of Andy Carroll on a short-term contract. So I was thinking, well, that seems a bit strange, because I've heard, there's a rumour, Bill. Yeah, there's whispers and noises, as always, coming out of various sources. And I thought, well, yeah, that's good news. Perhaps it's inconsistent with a fine or a deduction, but not. And they too have been given a wage cap, and they have to follow a business plan. So it's not just a case of a points deduction and then forget about it. There are consequences, and as you rightly said, it can take years to get out of this, especially when a club is relegated. I think the one positive from the perspective of fans of Derby County is that we were saying fairly similar things about Wigan Athletic 15 months ago, and they are now top of League One, and they've got new owners, and everybody appears to be rowing in the same direction, and decisions are being made on a sensible basis, in terms of being able to underwrite the costs. And that's an example of how things can turn around relatively quickly, even in the darkest moments.
I'm not like you, Kieran. I don't like to Google while other people are talking, but I'm fairly sure Reading had 2 seasons in the Premier League, mainly under the blessed Saint Steve Coppell. The Andy Carroll thing was strange. I mean, there were some unkind people today, Kieran, suggesting that a 6-point deduction was a bit of a harsh penalty for signing Andy Carroll. But you do wonder. God, he's a very nice bloke, by the way. God bless him. Except when he's scoring wonder goals against Palace for West Ham. But you do wonder at what stage in the contract negotiations they went to, oh, yeah, by the way, we might be getting a 6-point deduction. Somebody under their breath would have mentioned that at some stage. But it seems odd that they can have this good news. It's plastered over all the papers. He's still a big name. So there he was. And I wish they could find another way of a player holding a shirt up.
No, it's terrible, isn't it?
It doesn't seem to be one. But there he is, holding up his shirt. It didn't look quite big enough. And then the very next day, this was announced. You wonder, I mean, if Reading's owners thought that was enough of a distraction for the fans, and they clearly got that wrong, didn't they?
They certainly did, absolutely.
Yeah. This is a strange one, Kieran. The chairman of the Premier League, Gary Hoffman, will leave the job in January, and much as they spin it by saying he was always due to leave fairly soon, you can't help but thinking he's been hounded out by those club owners unhappy about the sudden announcement of the Newcastle deal.
Well, I think that the Newcastle deal was the icing on the cake of his tenure as the chairman of the Premier League. It took a lot of attempts and people pulling out of the role who were originally due to be appointed. He then came into, I think it's fair to say, a very quiet fanfare about 18 months ago. Clearly, he's also had to deal with the issues in relation to COVID, but there have been 2 major concerns in respect of the Super League proposals, there are 14 clubs in the Premier League who thought that he was at best sympathetic towards the proposals of Super League, at worst complicit in some way, and that he'd had a relationship with some of the chief executives of those clubs who were behind Super League. So, therefore, that made him unpopular with a lot of club owners. And then, in respect of Newcastle, I think the way that it all sort of fell into place so quickly, there didn't appear to be any heads up of clubs. It was just an announcement that was made, and then the takeover fell into place within a few hours following the decision that that PIF were within the owners and directors test. And that's resulted in a lot of anger. First of all, from the flagrantly innocent owners of the Big Six clubs, who now fear Newcastle as a competitor for European places, and also, be honest, clubs towards the bottom who felt that Newcastle potentially might be taking a relegation place. So so you can see why those clubs are a bit angsty, and I think Newcastle related issues are going to arise in respect of quite a few more stories on tonight's show, sort of directly or indirectly.
Well, directly, Kieran, because the next news story basically it says here in Guy's very own typing, or rather whatever intern he's paid. What am I talking about? Paid. Newcastle's new owners are confident they can agree Saudi sponsorship deals next month. I mean, I presume that's as in I'm confident that Christmas will be on the 25th of December, and I'm confident that Guy will never buy a round of drinks. I mean, of course they're confident. I think they're more than confident. They're pretty certain this is going to happen, Kieran, is it really?
Yes. I did an analysis of Newcastle's sponsorship arrangements and their commercial revenues. When Mike Ashley took over in 2007, Newcastle generated half of Manchester United's commercial revenue. Oh. And now it's 1/10.
Wow.
So, I think that's indicative. And people say, well, Manchester United have been fantastic during that period. Yes, they have. Nobody is denying that. But even if you look at the other members of the Greedy Six, Big Six, whatever you want to call them, they've all shown substantial growth in terms of commercial revenue. Whereas under Mike Ashley, Newcastle's went up by 5% over 13 years, which is staggering given the growth of the Premier League during that period. So you can understand why the Newcastle owners now feel that with the removal of Ashley from the equation, because people simply wouldn't sign deals with Newcastle because they know that it's likely to result in a boycott of their products on the back of this from Newcastle fans. So I would expect a bounce back. There has been this moratorium of related party transactions over the course of the last few weeks. That was the first thing that the executives agreed. But even so, I think the Newcastle owners will now be looking to leverage on the interest in the club in the Middle Eastern area, especially in Saudi Arabia, and to start to try to arrange some. They can't necessarily change front of shirt sponsor deals, but they can certainly get official partners for that area of that area of the planet.
There must be a word that's bigger than confident. I mean, I wouldn't like to be the CEO of a Saudi business who turned around and said, "Nah, I don't think so. It's not for me. Newcastle, I'm all right. I'll sponsor another club if that's okay." I think we can be. I just love that Newcastle are confident. At Manchester United, you just mentioned their latest financial figures are out, and also it looks, Kieran, as though they will be inviting fans onto the board in some sort of way.
Yes. So yeah, a couple of stories coming out of Old Trafford. Their figures came out today. Clearly, they are now playing in front of a full Old Trafford, so they're generating £3.5 million per match. They'll be able to increase that for some of the cup games if they make progress in the Champions League and so on. I think a lot of attention will be what was aimed at the Ronaldo effect, and their merchandise revenue was up a fifth, which is pretty impressive. Although, before people saying, well, that's all due to Ronaldo, remember, what we've just said, in the sense that matches are now taking place at Old Trafford, and therefore the merchandise store, the mega store, is open on match days and non-match days, and that will be ticking over considerably. I think the other big figure that came through was the wage bill, which is up 23% in a year. So, when we're next in negotiations with producer Guy, we will say, are these rumours that he's now doing some podcasts at Old Trafford? Are they being reflected in Manchester United's results? I think that could be the case. Or it might be something to do once again with young Cristiano arriving. And as we all suspect, he's not going to be on a modest wedge, is he?
You wouldn't have thought so. I'm not sure exactly. It's probably more than a wedge. Yes. Well, if there's something that's more than confident, I think he's probably on more than a wedge. And what about the shares, Kieran?
Yes, so what we have seen was an announcement from the club that progress has been made in relation to Manchester United Supporters Trust, MUST, that is hoping to get around about $10 million worth of shares. But the important thing is these will be issued along the same lines as what's referred to as the B shares. And the B shares are presently all owned by the Glazer family. And the difference between their shares and the ones which most people trade on the New York Stock Exchange is that the B shares carry 10 votes each. As opposed to just one vote. So they do give, in theory, greater power. So that's the positive. Now, we're not quite sure at this stage whether it's going to be Manchester United issuing the shares, in which case the club will receive $10 million from the fan base, or whether the Glazers will sell some of the shares. I suspect it might be the former. And then you say, okay, is that good? Well, what does $10 million buy you? Well, at today's share price, it probably will buy you around about 650,000 shares. That sounds a lot. That could turn into a lot of votes. Some people might be thinking, but then go into the small print, and it turns out that the Glazers own 119 million of these shares. So, the fans get 600,000. The Glazers have got 119 million. We know where the power is going to lie. So is this tokenism from the club? Well, I think that could be a conclusion. A lot will depend on, will these shares have some form of additional power, which will force the board to listen to the fan base on a more adult level. Will they be able to attend one board meeting a year or two board meetings a year? Nobody's claiming from the Supporters Trust that we want to get involved in big decisions, but having the voice of the fans heard is essential. I think for the future governance of any club, if it genuinely wants to go forwards, and we are hoping to have the fan-led review out in the next couple of weeks, and that will be interesting to see what powers will be given to fan bases in terms of the recommendations there. So it's cautious optimism, I think, from a fan's perspective, but it's not going to be a game changer.
Kieran, apologies, you may have already answered this in that very eloquent answer, but I was slightly distracted by dropping a pen And in the retrieving of dropping the pen, I managed to pull the plug out of the laptop, which nearly went into my glass of wine. Bye-bye. This is the bye-bye BAFTA moment. I like it that our listeners are starting to predict where the bye-bye BAFTA moment is. Will there be an upper limit for the number of shares that people can buy out of this latest share issue?
At present, there's no detail. So
Right, okay.
we did see a lower limit of the number of shares which could be purchased when Rangers issued some shares to fans. I think the lower limit there was 500 shares or £500 worth of shares. So wait and see. And then you've got the issue of how do you define a fan? Because there are private investors who presently own A shares who say, well, yes, we are investors, but we also support Manchester United. So can we therefore convert our A shares into B shares? And I think it could get a little bit messy, or some people could get a little bit upset if they feel that their existing shareholdings are being diluted as a result of this.
That's a really interesting point, Kieran. And despite the fact I've been hosting a football finance podcast for some time now, it's never occurred to me that, would a club ask for proof that they've been a fan for at all? Would there be a quiz? Would there be a rudiment? Would they hold up a picture of Gary Neville and ask them to say who that is? Because otherwise it could just be exploited by people wanting to invest in them, what is, after all, a fairly major product.
Yes, and the fear is, could fans from other clubs apply for these? And therefore, and if they manage to put together a large amount of money, that could be that could be used for mischief making. Now, I don't think it would be the case. It would cost an awful lot of money, and you would hope that it would go through the supporters' trust. But that's why the small print needs to be reviewed carefully by both parties.
I might start a crowdfund to buy some shares in Brighton. Item number 1, no guest pies.
Oh, careful, the crowds will plummet.
Don't worry, the Brighton Brawlers will get them back. That'll be fine. And talking of getting people back, Kieran, this rather erudite reference, which I've just thought of, might well get the BAFTA people back on board. As I believe it was Wordsworth who described poetry as emotion recollected in tranquility, and Swindon fans are currently recollecting some emotion in tranquility. It's not that many months ago that Swindon dominated our pod for a good 4, 5, 6 weeks, and at the time we could never quite get to the bottom of how Gareth Barry fitted in to the problem. And now Gareth Barry has been charged by the FA over alleged breaches of regulations relating to the ownership and or funding of Swindon Town.
Yes, under FA rules, and remember this is separate from the Premier League, this is separate from the EFL. Under FA rules, a person who is employed by a club as a player cannot have an involvement as an owner. I think the accusation is that because Gareth Barry was a footballer, he therefore was not able to own any shares in any clubs. And therefore, if the money, which some people claim, going into this story again in depth, I think is something we can probably give a swerve to. But there were claims from Michael Standing, who was his agent for a while, that and then it came from Lee Power, who was the prior owner of Swindon Town, that Gareth Barry was the de facto owner of a proportion of the club. And if that is the case, then potentially he is in breach of the current rules. I think there was, again, a claim, and we have no evidence or proof of this, but there was a claim that there was an attempt to disguise this ownership, either in the form of a loan or he had a nominee effectively own those shares on his behalf. So it's all very messy, and it's going to involve our good friends in the learned, in the silver tongue profession once again, probably having to have discussions with all of the parties involved. And it's a shame in the sense that Swindon Town have moved on, and but the Football Association, they're duty bound by their rules and they can't move on.
if there's one thing that producer Guy has drummed into us, it's not to speculate too much on things about which we have no evidence or proof. He gets quite cross when, despite the fact we have no evidence or proof, we seem perfectly able to have a conversation about something and drop really heavy hints. Now, the Premier League has closed a loophole which allowed managers and players to receive secret payments, which begs the question of why, in the name of Jesus, Mary and Joseph and the little donkey, was there ever a loophole in the first place which allowed managers and players to receive secret payments?
Yes, and this is another one of these issues which may or may not be connected to the recent takeover of Newcastle United. One of the allegations that was made in respect of football leaks and Manchester City was that the former manager, was it Roberto Mancini? Yes. As well as being paid a salary for managing Manchester City Football Club, was also in receipt of money which looked remarkably similar to a salary, but wasn't a salary as such, from a company which was related to the owners of Manchester City. And the benefit that this gives, of course, as it's not going through Manchester City's books, it therefore doesn't qualify for financial fair play purposes and allowed the club to stay within the limits. The fear of some people in football, in the Premier League, is that because financial fair play rules, profitability and sustainability rules are that much more severe than they were a few years ago, that Newcastle United will be trying to circumvent these rules by taking a similar approach. And it's when FFP first came out, the first thing I did was say, well, if we're allowed to, if we've got either a wage control or we've got a loss control, all that you do is that you siphon the money to the player via or the manager through a different vehicle, and it's fairly standard. And I'm pretty aware of Uncle Terry used to describe these as no-show jobs, where he'd be drawing a wage from a business for providing services, which should we say insurance-related services, without actually physically doing anything as such. And this is the accusation that is being levelled, or the fear. Looking at these rules, however, these contracts will be in respect of what is defined as a related party to the club owner. So is it another company? Is it a company in which they are on board members potentially, and so on? So that we can leave that all to the lawyers. I still think it's quite easy to circumvent, because what you could do is, let's say that Newcastle United go to play an exhibition game in Saudi Arabia, and they are given an appearance fee by the promoter of this exhibition game, and that appearance fee is a considerable sum of money, but the promoter is not directly linked to PIF, and therefore under these proposed rules, you'd be able to walk your way around them. Now, if I can do that in sort of 30 seconds of Zen-like contemplation, there's people a lot smarter than me who will be thinking, we don't see this as a problem. We just see this as a challenge from a legal or regulatory point of view, because we have some. We're talking only recently about David Beckham being paid, is it £15 million a year to be an ambassador for Qatar. Could players end up being ambassadors for individual companies who are not directly linked and therefore don't qualify as related parties for Saudi companies? Potentially.
I think, Kieran, we can be pretty sure that Newcastle's new owners are confident that they can play exhibition matches in Saudi Arabia. I think there's a high level of confidence at that sort of things. And I would speculate as well, when it comes to Uncle Terry, that no show job sounds like Cockney rhyming slang, but Guy has really asked us to be less smutty. Guy's really laid down the law about us. Guy says, it's not Viz, It's not Viz. It's a podcast, not Viz. He doesn't talk like that. Well, I can't. I have to disguise his voice even when I'm doing an impression of him.
He's very Didsbury. He's very Didsbury, his producer guy.
Is he? Not being from Manchester myself, I'm not entirely sure what very Didsbury means, but I think I can understand. This was interesting. As I came in this evening, Stockport had just scored against Bolton in the FA Cup replay. And overseas TV deals for FA Cup games are going to drop by 20%. Why is that, Kieran?
Well, the FA Cup, you and I both grew up in the 1970s. We can name every single winning team of the FA Cup in the 1970s, but we can't do it for the last 5 years because the FA Cup has become a devalued competition. Now, if you are the Football Association and you are trying to sell a product which is devalued in the eyes of clubs, it therefore becomes devalued in the eyes of fans, and therefore it doesn't attract viewing figures. So the FA has a real challenge on its hands these days. Clubs are putting out scratch teams. If you get knocked out of the FA Cup, we now as fans just sort of, now this is not the case for clubs, I think, in the lower leagues, but if Brighton get knocked out by a mid-ranking championship club, we go, oh, okay, that wasn't very good, was it? And then you focus on the next Premier League game, and that's actually makes me slightly uneasy because I'm old enough to remember my transistor radio at 11 a.m. on a Monday where you're all huddled round it with your mates, working out what the draw is. The problem with the FA Cup, we no longer have replays. I was talking to a source who is confident that the way that the FA Cup is going to go is that, with the exception of the third round, it's now going to become a midweek competition, which means that if you're the FA and you're trying to sell the rights to the FA Cup in Asia, they're 7 hours ahead of us. Well, who's going to watch Manchester United's reserves play Coventry City at 4 a.m. in Hong Kong? It's simply not going to attract significant numbers. So therefore, if you're trying to sell the rights in China, where we've already seen a mass reduction in the rights for the Premier League itself, and other parts of Asia, there's a genuine fear that the magic of the cup has gone, and therefore the money associated with it's gone, and that impacts not upon the big clubs. It impacts upon the smaller clubs. The prize fund for the FA Cup has halved over the course of the last couple of years. Yes, there was an impact of COVID, but it hasn't bounced back this season, and that's bad news for all of those clubs that we love. The likes of Stockport and so on, for whom an FA Cup run, especially getting into the third or fourth round, is a significant issue.
It looked on a brief glance that Edgeley Park was fairly full for the game tonight, and I'd be interested to see what the viewing figures are, because my guess is that for a lot of football fans, certainly in our demographic, they'd rather watch Stockport versus Bolton in the first round than some combination of Man City v Arsenal, Chelsea in the final. Yeah, it's not, and as you say, the impact is on clubs much further down. If the money goes out of the FA Cup, Man City won't notice it, but Stockport certainly will. So, Kieran, we tease Guy from time to time. We do that, but of course that teasing comes from a place of affection. As I said to a friend of mine recently from Gloucester, whose name is Gloucester Dave. Some nicknames are not always clever. I was explaining that sometimes teasing can be a sign of affection, and he went, "Well, you must fucking love me then." Apologies for the swearing. Gloucester Dave is the nicest man in the world unless you criticise badgers. He goes mad. He just won't have it. Oh, Jesus. When me and my friend Mark Webster, who's the most cockney man in the world, accidentally implied, just for the purpose of winding up Gloucester Dave, that badgers may be the cause of bovine TB. He turned a table over in the pub. He called us a pair of towny bastards. And because it was obviously the wrong thing to do, because every time we see him now, we just take the piss out of badgers, which is, I believe it's the modern version of badger baiting. I don't know. But one problem I do have with Guy is when Guy occasionally reverts to young person speak. as in when he types things like West Ham's holding company has a bunch of new directors. I'm not sure what the proper collective noun accountants use for some new directors, but I'm pretty sure it's not a bunch of new directors, and it's the next generation of the families involved as well, isn't it?
That's right. We saw last week there was some Czech Republic investment, and two of the people there, including the main man, are appearing now on the board of West Ham. But yes, Jack Sullivan, who is the 22-year-old son of owner David Sullivan, for whom I think I did work briefly in 1983.
Hang on a second, while you were working in the porn industry, you mean?
Yes. Well, that wasn't. It wasn't. Yeah, I was involved in retail, Kevin. I wasn't. But although I was working with people
retailing porn, yeah,
retailing porn. Oh, yeah, I suppose so. Yeah. But I was only there because a mate of mine did used to run the shop, and he went away on he went away on a kibbutz for 3 months and asked me to take over.
That's it. Kieran, to be fair, that's what Uncle Terry used to tell you. I'm going away for 9 months on the kibbutz.
Yeah, in Pentonville.
Yes, okay. So, yes, the young fella.
Yes, so, Jack Sullivan, who I believe is very keen on West Ham, has been brought onto the board. And this would appear to be inconsistent with, I think, the perception of many people that the club is going to be sold to the Czech investors. But there's the board of directors at West Ham, especially during lockdown, appeared to be quite fluid because if you were a director, that allowed you to attend matches, and
okay.
I think Mr. Sullivan's former partner, she appeared on the board of directors for a period of time and then didn't.
Okay,
so we'll wait and see.
I could almost hear the ... then at the end of, and then didn't. Just a couple more stories to go before that really interesting interview with Maheta Molango. Private equity may be taking the place of the billionaire owners in European club football. That really is one of those sentences where you go, yeah, well, so interesting, though.
Yeah, what we're seeing is an exodus to a certain extent of Chinese investors in European football. I think the government's initial enthusiasm for closer links with European football has waned. I think the government's had a rethink in China as to its priorities in terms of football. And what we are now seeing is an influx of money from the USA. And the thing about private equity investors, first of all, they've got absolutely no interest in football as a sport. Let's just be perfectly blunt about this. They have a lot of interest in making money. And that's the nature of the beast. So therefore, they are looking for a financial return. Now, if you're looking for a financial return, one of the things you don't like is risk and volatility. And they've invested heavily in US franchise sports, and I think FSG, the owners of Liverpool, I think they're about to make another investment in an American franchise sport over there. They cannot get their heads around the concept of relegation, because that creates there is a risk of relegation that creates revenue volatility in the sense that second tier football in practically everywhere is far less lucrative. So therefore, what these private equity companies are doing is they're saying, well, there's a risk that our investment in Belgium or Spain or Italy or France could turn sour on the backs of relegation. But the chances of all 4 clubs, if we go and buy 4 clubs, the chances of 4 of them suffering relegation at the same time is fairly remote. So therefore, the model that is being sold to them is you de-risk by setting up these multi-club enterprises. And that could be the way that they're going to go in terms of investments in European football. The trouble with private equity, they come in, they cut costs, they try to monetize, which is a word for remember, we're legacy fans according to Florentino Perez. So but he's not particularly interested in people like myself or you because of we don't have the requisite amount of money. But there are people who are willing to pay a lot of money. And again, whilst it's not on our playlist for tonight, Chelsea announced today, I believe, that season tickets in one of their stands are going up from £1,200 to £4,000.
What?
Yeah.
Sorry, I was nodding along with that there. Jeez, yeah, okay. Well, I'll tell you what. Let's discuss that further on Monday's pod, Kieran.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because we have to get to our interview. But also on a similar note, sorry, £4,000 for a season ticket. The sentence I'm about to read out is proof positive that, for good or bad, the game of football has changed immensely in the last decade or so. There are many reasons why I wish that Bill Shankly and Brian Clough were still with us, and the look on their face when I read this sentence out would be one of them. Says here that the website of Manchester City's cryptocurrency partner has gone down.
Yes.
The website bit is fine. The website of Manchester City's cryptocurrency partner has gone down.
Well, it's not their cryptocurrency partner. It is their official regional partner in decentralized finance trading analysis.
Kieran, if I hadn't already used a swear word on this program, I'd be telling you where to shove that sentence.
I think we've got to give a lot of credit here to because there is sort of a bit of a deeper story. There's a guy called Martin Calladine who is he is a investigator. He really goes into some of the more unusual activities in football clubs. So he's an author, he's a blogger, he's got a really good book which is coming out in January, which I would I've caught a few pages of that, and this is a company.
Let's get him on.
Yeah, we will. Yeah, cool.
Yeah.
This is a company called 3Key, which is some form of cryptocurrency organization, but trying to work out who's behind it is proving to be impossible. Now, we all, Kevin, we all leave some form of fingerprints on the internet. If I want to find out about you, I'd look at your agent's page with references to you. You've got a Wikipedia reference. You've got references to your involvement with Palace and so on. So we can start to build up a little bit of background about most people. But when we come to the people behind this company called 3Key, their chief growth strategist, Jacob Kane, their media contact, Aveline Smith, their chief communications officer, nothing on LinkedIn.
Wow.
Nothing, no trace of these people whatsoever. So is this something to do with crypto washing? Is this something more sinister? It's a company which, in theory, was started in the Seychelles in September 2020. So it's a company which has only been going for a year. So what on earth is it doing, getting in bed with a Premier League football club? Because normally, as any form of commercial partner, you're going to have to go and pay a fair amount of money for that privilege. So I think City are starting to step back from this as well. They're wondering what on earth have we got involved with. Doesn't look a lot of good, but fair play to Martin for doing the hard yards. And because if something if something looks like as it just seems sort of random middle management speak words thrown into a sentence to become this strange relationship with Manchester City, it's not quite right.
Yeah, I believe, according to Wikipedia, I'm a small village in Devon. Imagine trying to explain. Just trying to think. Imagine trying to explain to Brian Clough. They're not on LinkedIn, Brian. They're not on LinkedIn. What? They're not on LinkedIn. We're on safer ground with this last bit of news, Kieran. I don't think this is going to anger me as much. Maybe Lawrence Bassini is back.
Yes, Lawrence Bassini, the prick's prick, as he is known in the world of football club ownership. Lawrence Bassini.
I'm going to carry on chuckling. Will you carry on with the story? I'll be chuckling in the background.
Lawrence Bassini was in charge of Watford for a short period of time. Things went very wrong at Watford. He ended up being banned from football for a few years. He then tried to come back. He tried to acquire Bolton Wanderers, and when the likes of Ken Anderson, who was Bolton's prior owner, when he says, "Well, I don't want to get involved in somebody like this," he could. And Ken Anderson was a man who I think he was previously banned from being the director of any company in the whole of the UK for around about 6 years. When something like him says, "I don't want to get involved with Bassini," you know that we're talking about somebody who is spectacularly of concern, I think, for the game. I believe he's turned up at Charlton. Where he's sniffing round. He now is being linked with an acquisition of Birmingham City for £27 million. Birmingham City are presently owned by Far Eastern investors. I hope for all the unhappiness and dissatisfaction that Birmingham City fans have with their present owners, and things haven't really worked out particularly well. They are still a lot better than Lawrence Bassini, because his track record is very poor. If you talk to people in the game about involvement with him, he is a fantasist. He will say one thing and then he will contradict himself in a meeting, even having taken advice from his professional partners within minutes. So I think there are some people for whom they're attracted to football like a moth to a flame, but they really are not good for individual clubs or the sport as a whole.
Now, it can't be easy to take over an organisation from somebody who's been in the role of chief executive for 40 years, but that's what Maheta Molango has done at the PFA, the Professional Footballers Association, replacing Gordon Taylor. And Kieran went today to chat with him.
Start your wellness journey at Whole Foods Market, where it's Jumpstart January through the 16th. Stock up on supplements with some of the year's biggest savings. Plus, save on air-chilled organic boneless skinless chicken breasts, organic Honey Crisp apples, organic large Hass avocados, and more. And since Whole Foods Market is the only certified organic national grocer, it's easy to make them your wellness destination. Jumpstart your January now at Whole Foods Market.
Maheta, thank you so much for giving up your time and coming on the podcast. You've been in this role now for a few months. Is it as you would expect it to be? What would you say have been your biggest challenges?
Well, thank you very much, first of all, for having me. It's been great. It's been very exciting. I think I'm one of those who believe that you need to be careful about assessing organization from the outside. And because what we learn over time is that typically what you see from the outside may or may not be the same as what you see when you're inside. So I very kind of consciously tried to avoid making any assessment prior to joining, and really wanted to first join, meet with the staff, meet with the employee, understand first what they thought about the organization and what were the strengths, as well as what could be the area of improvement. And then I really tried to spend time with the various stakeholders, starting with the players. So I went and meet quite a few of them in their dressing room, starting at the Premier League level, etc. So it's been a very interesting, opportunity for me to confirm that the PFA is a great organization, that it does a lot of good, that I think a lot of time maybe the negative publicity that it has had over the last few years, I think does not justice to the actual work of the organization and to what it does for footballers. And having been myself a member and have benefited firsthand from the PFA, I think it was reassuring to see that what I saw from the outside was the case. Having said that, obviously, society evolves. I think the generation of players is very different from my generation of player. And I think what I saw is a need to continue to evolve, to adapt the type of service that we provide to what the players nowadays want. And I think this will be hopefully the main duty, to really try to convert what the players want, because this is their organization, not mine. And I think we need to move away from a model associated to names, but rather a model associated to the actual members. Those are the people who actually run this organization, and I'm here to try to serve them to the best of my ability.
Cool. And when you had those conversations with players, were there common themes that they raised in terms of their concerns with regards to the way that they see their profession going, and the challenges that they have, both as players, but also presumably you've also spoken to those players who are coming towards the end of their careers and their development once they leave the football profession itself?
Yes, I think there is a wrong assumption about the fact that because we represent such a wide range of people, from the Premier League all the way to League Two, and we also represent the WSL players, and therefore there is this wrong assumption that because they are under different financial conditions, then there is a disparity, which means that they don't have anything in common. And what I found very interesting in my discussion is that there is so much more in common than what people want to see. Starting from the fact, just to give you an example, that when you get to 35, 99% of the player needs to work because of money. Because from 35 to 85, you better have done a lot of money to be able to do nothing. But the 1% need to work because of purpose. Because in the end, those people are what they are because they're great competitors, because they've got a reason for being there and competing. And in the end, you get yourself to 35 and you need to kind of redefine your identity, which has implication from a number of different perspectives. So, for example, what I found is in the end, at 35, everyone needs to do something. Some of them for money and another for purpose. So that's just one example. On the mental well-being thing, just to give another example, in the end, it doesn't matter how much you make a month, because being on the bench, being injured, being out of the squad, wanting to move to a new club and not being able to do so for a number of reasons, it affects you, irrespective of how much you make. Actually, maybe the more you make and the more visible you are, the more you suffer, because then everything is multiplied, disproportionately. So, one of the conclusions that I drove from those visits is the players as a group have a lot in common, irrespective of how much they make and the level that they play. And I think what I liked about the conversation is that they're starting realizing that there are certain issues that they cannot solve on their own. Irrespective of how strong the platform that they have is, and the number of followers they have, there are certain things that you either sit at the right table to influence the decision, or it's pointless. Financial fair play, the racism, the online abuse, dementia. So there are a number of different situations, obviously the congestion in terms of fixtures. So I think what was very positive was that for all the bad things that COVID has brought, I think it has also given people the opportunity to realize that there are certain things that could only be solved collectively as opposed to be solved individually, as some people may have thought they would have been able to do. So that was really good for us, really, really good.
Great. But you mentioned there the issue of racist abuse for your members, both at matches and online. Do you think that the players should take a more severe stand and be prepared to walk off the pitch, or to take on the authorities, perhaps by having a much broader boycott of social media firms? Or is it a function that social media is such a big monster these days and it's so out of control that players as individuals or collectively as a union really are fighting an impossible fight?
I think what the players want to see is tangible action. And what we've tried to do over the last few months is work on a report with a company called Signify, precisely to try to highlight that if you want to take action, you can. And it comes down to whether you want or you don't want. And I'm not talking about the players, obviously, because what we found unacceptable is that the burden right now is on the victim. So as it currently stands, it is for the victim, the player in this case, to actually push a button and saying, I don't want to see the comment. Why should it be this? Why should it be like this?
Yeah.
So what we're saying is we did a very thorough study, which covered 6 to 7 million posts. So it's a pretty representative sample. And the outcome of that was, on the one hand, that you could obviously block the comments, but this is something fairly kind of straightforward. But beyond that, you are able to identify who is making those comments. And going a step further, you're able to identify who does this person actually support. Because typically you can link the identity of this person with a specific fan base or a connection to a specific club. And this then leads to the ability to actually take action, because the platform can actually block those people, preventing them from actually acting on their platform. This can be reported to the police, which can then take action, but it can also be reported to the clubs, so that the clubs can actually ban those people from their stadium. Because I would imagine that for some of those guys, the worst punishment is being prohibited from watching their team at weekend. So I think the players have got to a stage where they just want to see action, and I hope that we can contribute to the union to show that it's a question of willingness to act, not of a technical hurdle to be able to do it.
Excellent. Yes, absolutely. Fully understand. And yeah, as an outsider, we do wonder, why are the social media companies and why is there seems to be so little enthusiasm? Because all they seem to be care about is traffic for their platforms, and not the nature of the comments which are being made, which are unacceptable. You also mentioned there the issue of dementia, and clearly there has started to be some initial research taking place. Does the PFA offer any advice to players in terms of the precautions that they could perhaps consider at present, but again, looking at their careers beyond football, in terms of trying to reduce this dementia risk? And do you also think that in due course, perhaps in 20 years' time, we will look back and say, I can't believe people used to head the ball, and it will actually cease to be part of football in terms of the rules of the game?
Look, it's a very difficult topic, because I tried to take the time alongside the chair of our players board, John Machino, to really go and meet those families, and really understand firsthand, both from his perspective as a current player, as well as my perspective as a former player, to understand, what are the issues, what are the problems, what type of things are you going through? Because I'm one of those to believe that in the end, I will never claim that I understand the situation, because if you don't go through that, you'll never understand. You can only try to show as much support as you can, and I think that's an important step. So what I found is two things. One, a situation where people are suffering as we talk, and therefore, although the research needs to continue, I think there needs to be support for people who are currently suffering, because it's something which is happening right now. And what we've tried to do as the PFA, and that was, by the way, this predates my arrival. So, I want to give credit for what has been done, because it has been done in the right way. So in December 2020, the decision was made to create a task force. And it was made out of the need to actually bring on board the voice of the families. And I think we're very lucky. And again, this predates my arrival. And I want to stress this once again, because I want to take credit for what is mine. And if it's not mine, then it's not mine. And this is not mine. And the fact is, we're lucky enough to have Dawn Assel, as well as Rachel Walden, to join us as PFA as what they call themselves critical friends.
Yeah.
So really, people are able to tell us the truth about the situation, what needs to be done, how can it be improved, always challenging us to improve. And I think their arrival as part of the task force was critical, because it really kind of changed the dynamic, the perception, our internal perception about the situation, to really try to respond to what the family needs as opposed to what we believe they need, which I think is different. And then we complemented that with a company called DISC. So what DISC does, alongside Sporting Memories, who also do a great job, is basically provide that more technical support to people, because a lot of time it's not a question of money, it's a question of logistics sometimes. How do I handle, a father who just, is very difficult to handle on a day-to-day basis. how do I actually go about certain very basic stuff on my day-to-day? How do I seek mental support, etc.? So I think this is what the PFA have been doing since December 2020, which I believe in a pretty positive way. But again, this is not enough. We need to continue working. I think what I want to stress is I was very positively impressed by how the stakeholders have reacted to the dementia situation. We are currently working with the rest of the stakeholders on a joint strategy, which again predates my arrival, because this is something that has been going on. And I think what we needed to do is say to people what we're doing, because in the end, people need to know that we're working. And I think, as I said, I was very impressed by the positive attitude of the various stakeholders involved, starting with the Premier League, who have been, very, very proactive in trying to do things. And hopefully we can head in the right direction. And I guess things like the guidelines that we approved recently in terms of the number of headers per training, etc. I think we're heading the right direction. And what I'm saying to a lot of people is, let's not forget that thanks to the likes of Dawn or Penny Watson and Chris Sutton, etc., John Stiles, I think what we've managed to do in this country is bring to the agenda a topic which is not discussed anywhere else. And I think for all the frustration that we all feel about wanting to do more, just the fact that we managed to bring this important topic to the table, to be discussed, to raise awareness, and to try to hopefully protect my kids and yours from potentially a danger in the future, is in itself a huge legacy, which I believe needs to be given credit to in terms of the families advocating for that and pushing for that. Now, I think that as a PFA, we need to be that kind of unifying voice of advocacy on their behalf.
And do you work in conjunction with FIFPro and your fellow trade unions across Europe and other countries as well outside of Europe where this issue has also been raised? Or is this very much sort of presently focused as far as the UK is concerned?
Well, sadly, I think it is an issue which is only taken seriously here.
Wow.
I've had the privilege of being the chief executive of a club in Spain for 4 years. There's never been one single discussion about dementia. In fact, when you talk about dementia or CTE to people in Spain, they look at you kind of as if you were talking about something which they don't even know what you're talking about. And so is the case in Italy, and so is the case in France, and so is the case in Germany. So again, we shouldn't underestimate what we're trying to achieve here in this country in terms of raising awareness about something which is very, very serious.
Absolutely. You said that you are now an ex-footballer, and you've made that transition through you've got a legal background as well. There have been reports, and I think one of the player's wife is presently doing a PhD on this. Is it Noel Quinn's wife or something like that? In respect of the challenges that players have in that first 12 to 24 months. If you take a look at the number of players who suffer financial hardship in terms of bankruptcy, and also we're seeing a huge number of players separating from their partners and divorces and so on. Do you think the industry is doing enough to prepare footballers for being ex-footballers, or is this actually something which the PFA themselves are aware of and are acting in line with footballers? Because we've had ex-footballers on the show, and that common theme was, what do I put on my passport? How do I define myself? Because from the age of 16 till the age, whenever the player retires, he is a professional footballer, and that's how he's perceived by everybody. And trying to be an ex-footballer actually sounds very disturbing, very challenging for individuals. And can the PFA do more? Can football do more in terms of the Football Association, the Premier League, and the EFL, and so on?
Absolutely. I think, as you said, this is something that I've gone through myself. So I don't need to be told what it means to reinvent yourself. I was lucky enough to have parents who always told me that football was plan B, C, or D at best, and I had to study because that was the only way to be able to compete with anyone, irrespective of money, of status, of race. They always said to me, "Your brain is what will get you forward," and I'm very grateful to them. But I think that there are two moments, I think, in the career of a footballer which can be dramatic. The first one is, when you actually spend a lot of time in the academy, knowing that I think the stats are really shocking. The vast majority of the players who play in an academy do not make it to professional. And it's a big drama, because in the end, your identity, your family, your environment, everyone identifies you as being, Math, the player who plays for this club. This is your identity. And all of a sudden, when this dream then is not fulfilled, then this is a big problem. And in the end, those people end up being in big trouble. And I think they end up being a problem for the government and for society. And that's why I do believe that there is now awareness amongst government officials. I do believe that the fan-led review hopefully will highlight that, because they were very interested about that. And we're very thankful to Tracy Crouch for leading this effort and really identify this to be a critical issue. So this is one moment which is very critical. And the other one is at the age of 35 or whenever you retire, because as you were pointing out, the problem is that your entire life has revolved around football. And typically you have an average of 8 years of career. This is a reality, and after that, what do you do? What do you do? And again, it's not just a question of money, it's a question of identity. And the problem is that I think a lot of times, players are surrounded by people who don't tell them forcibly the truth. And I hope that we can be that voice of saying, this is a reality. When you stop playing, and I've said to them straight in the dressing room when I went there, when you stop playing, your phone goes silent. Yeah. Irrespective of how many Champions League you've won or because the industry is such that they will use you. And then once your expiry date is over, then there'll be new people who come in, and this is the way this is built. And I think you shouldn't be complaining, because this is part of how it works. And this is also probably made the career that you made. You need to accept that those are the rules. And it's brutal and it's ruthless, but then knowing the way this works, get ready. Don't wait until you get to 35 to plan. Use the platform that you have now, the fact that you have contact, that you have visibility to prepare for that. So again, hopefully, having been myself through that, maybe I can help them understanding how brutal, the end of the playing days could be.
Yep. I remember talking to a footballer who said that a few weeks after retirement, he had toothache, and he'd been a very successful footballer, but he wasn't registered with a dentist. He didn't know how to contact a dentist. Does he go through the NHS? Does he go private? All of this because the clubs organise your life for you. They dictate your life for you, and that is a real shock to the system. So
I'll tell you an anecdote if you allow me. So, what you're saying is so true, that to the point that in the end, what you realize that since the age of 8, your life has been so organized by someone else that it gets to a point where then when you stop playing, you don't even know what to do at weekends. Because your life has always revolved around that. So you never had any hobby beyond football. So it was on Saturday I do this, on Sunday I do that. So all of a sudden you're like, well, what am I doing? What are my interests beyond football? And it's a profession which really takes over your entire life, and not just your life, the life of your family. Yeah. So my wife and my kids, the concept of holidays, it's just, it's 2 weeks at best in the summer. That's it. So all of a sudden having, holiday in Christmas, it's like, what do we do? I mean, how does this work? No. So what people don't understand at times is that, you have approximately 4 million people who play football in this country. Only 3,500 make it to the professional level. Meaning the value of a sub in League 2, it has a value because you've left 3.9 million people behind you to get there. But for you to get there, you need to have a network of support around you, your family, which is suffering with you and needs to do a lot of sacrifice to get there. So sometimes I just feel people talk in a very frivolous way about footballers, as if it's just those guys, those spoiled kids running around in shorts. And I'm like, you're so wrong. You're so wrong in the way that you perceive those guys, because they've left millions beyond them. to make it there, and they make a lot of sacrifice. And right now with COVID, the life of those guys for the last 2 years have been miserable. So it's bubble to bubble.
Yeah.
No social interaction, nothing. It's just bubble to bubble. And let's not forget, because people forget it, that when I was at home, and probably you were at home, they went out and play, and they were told, just go out and play, it's gonna be fine. No protection, no vaccination. So yeah, I'm really keen to work hard on changing some of the perception which are just incorrect, to be polite.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, good luck with some of our media on that, because I think that they don't help. They don't help the cause at all. If we look in terms of things which you just mentioned, COVID. During COVID, we had Project Big Picture and then the European Super League, and I don't think those were a surprise in the sense that they were dealt with by, in my view, opportunistic people within the game, and they both aimed to concentrate power and money within the game in the hands of a few club owners, both domestically and internationally. Were the PFA is surely the most important stakeholders in the game. Were you given any consultation? Were you trying to be encouraged to support this by clubs, or did it just come as a complete shock to you as professional footballers, as it did, I think, for us as football fans?
Well, I think the worrying thing is that the players were the last to find out.
Wow.
So and this goes beyond the specific project. It's just, I think people need to realize that society has evolved, that this generation of people, let alone footballers, this generation of young people are not just happy to be told. So the days of authority just sending instruction and people saying yes, those days are gone. And again, not just the footballers. You go to a top law firm, and I've seen that myself, and the first year junior associate on day one says to the partners, who has 20 years of experience, what do you stand for?
Wow.
What do you stand for? And when I spent 10 years at Baker McKenzie and I didn't open my mouth because in my head, authority was authority. And I think what people need to realize is that the old model of governance, as it hit the expiry date, and if you do not adapt to the new generation of people who are well informed, and this generation of players specifically, they're smart people. They're well informed. They care. If you look at the England national team, for example, now I'm so proud to the likes of Jordan Henderson, Harry Maguire, Marcus Rashford, even Saka. Smart people, Declan Rice, good people who care. They're committed. They are attached to value, to purpose. And this is, I think, the reflection of society. Football is a nice reflection of society a lot of time, and I believe that this generation, I believe that the authorities, both locally and internationally, need to understand that the old model of governance, where you just turn up and say, guys, that's the way it's going to be played out, you're going to be in trouble, because this generation of people, they want to be part of the journey, they want to have a say, and I think, to be honest, that they have enough preparation to be able to do that,
Yeah, I think it was very noticeable, especially in relation to Super League, that when players like James Milner and Kevin De Bruyne were coming out and saying, "This isn't the game I fell in love with that you're trying to hijack." Whereas I think you're absolutely right historically, and I trained as an accountant, so I spent 5 years just nodding and doing exactly what I was told. It's good to see that the players are articulating their concerns, and that's great. Just one final question, Maheta. You've been so good with your time. This is actually a finance show that we do here, and so therefore I look at the finances of every single club in the UK, all the way down from the Premier League down to National League North and South, and the Scottish clubs as well, and the football authorities, and those of the PFA. Your main source of income is coming from a share of broadcasting rights. Every time those rights come up for renewal, it appears that the Premier League are trying to put more and more pressure on the PFA to reduce their share. Do you think that's justified on their behalf, given all of the work? And again, I see all of the work that you do in terms of education. I've even taught footballers myself. And B, what is your response to the Premier League as far as, they seem to say that more money should go to the owners and less money should go to organisations such as the PFA?
Look, I can only speak for myself. I can only speak about what I've seen since I joined. So I don't know exactly how this was played out in the past. What I can tell you is I've been welcomed by the Premier League. I think I hope they understood that we're here to try to grow the game. That I understand the importance of, because I've seen that myself, because I was a chief exec myself of the club. So I don't need to be told the importance of having a strong league, the importance of us being stronger together as opposed to working individually. So I get that. And I think we want to be a 21st century union, which actually brings about growth, and the bigger the pie is, the better for everyone. And then we can talk about how we distribute that money, no? So that's point number one. Point number two, I strongly disagree with some of the stuff that I've read about, the PFA being funded by, the PFA is not funded by the Premier League, because the TV money stems in the first place from the performance of the people on the pitch.
Yeah.
So this is money which in the first place belonged to the players. In turn, this was assigned to the club, which in turn assigned it to the Premier League to sell it collectively in order to achieve a better deal. And I'll tell you more, this reasoning is supported by the fact that in other countries, it is by law that the union receives a percentage of the TV rights deal. Because, for example, in Spain. So in Spain, it is by law that the percentage goes to the union. So I believe that in the end, it's a legitimate way, and I think a positive way to actually bringing back money which in the first place belonged to the players, which are the stars of the show. And I do believe that I'm very much looking forward to continue work with the Premier League. As I said, I think the vibes are very positive. I've got the feeling that they understand that we're here to try to grow the industry, and I think we're proving it. We're showing it with the vaccination, how supportive we've been in terms of trying to get the players to make an educated choice based on science, although it's their personal choice and we'll never interfere in that, but an educated choice, and we've been supportive. We've been supportive with Project Restart. By the way, we paid £1 million to EFL to be able to actually do the testing. So the testing last year was paid by the PFA, which sometimes is not really told. At all. So we're showing how, on the quarantine situation, on the red list country, we sent a letter signed by 41 players, including the likes of Cavani, Mane, Alisson Becker, this kind of player, to try to support the Premier League, what they're trying to achieve. So, we want to cooperate. We believe in cooperation. We believe in a strong league and a league which drive growth. But we just think that it's fair that the stars of the show, first of all, are listened to and have real tangible voice in their career. Because, without them, there's no game. So without footballers, there's no game. And second, that the distribution needs to be fair in order for us to be able to provide the support that we want to provide to our players. And this requires, manpower.
Absolutely brilliant. Thank you so much for your time, and we really appreciate you. I know what a busy person you are, and I think the fan-led review is out in a week. So I'm sure there'll be ideally good news for your members and for us fans as well. Thank you so much, Maheta.
My pleasure. Thank you very much.
Kieran, I think already there's a level of enthusiasm and energy that you're hearing that we didn't hear perhaps from the previous incumbent of that role. And just the fact that he's taken the whole issue of dementia seriously, working with Dawn Astor, and also the fact that he's going into dressing rooms and he's actually saying to players, look, your career ends at 35, 36. What are you going to do after? It's very forward thinking to say, look, we represent you now, but what are you going to be when you're not professional footballers?
That's right. And as he said, 1% of footballers will make enough money through their career, which will take them through from 35 to 85. The other 99%, yes, some of them are earning good money now. The average career length, 7 or 8 years. You cannot you cannot future-proof your whole life. And we've seen tragic stories of footballers who have been poorly advised. So he's very keen on education. He's a lawyer himself. He's been the chief executive of a club. He's been legal counsel to clubs. He understands football from the dressing room, but also the boardroom. So therefore, I think he's got credibility when he's talking to the Premier League, when he's talking to the FA and so on. And he wants to represent his members in a professional manner, but he wants to do that rowing in the same direction as the other stakeholders. I was hugely impressed by him, and I think he will aim to do good for the game in terms of the players whom, as he said, players get an awful lot of stick. Sometimes it's justified, but you don't realise just what it's like to be a footballer, and until you've walked in that person's shoes. He's done that, and he came to me. He came across to me as incredibly professional, very smart, and I think he will do very well for his membership.
Well, also much as he does sound brilliant, and he sounds like a breath of fresh air, certainly for players. Let's hope he's not in a job for 40 years, because that's not healthy. That's not healthy for any organisation, that somebody is at the top for that length of time. I don't care what the organisation is. So, and hopefully he'll be sensible enough to start to make changes and also to plan for the future. But that future will be in 5-7 years' time rather than 40 years' time.
Yes, and I think he probably sees it in that position as well. I think Gordon Taylor became too obsessed with protecting his fiefdom, and that meant that sometimes he could take his eye off the ball with regards to the best interests of his members.
Yeah. Now, if you'd like to make a small monthly contribution to the pod, which will always be free to air, as we've promised right from the start, then that would be very kind of you. Go to patreon.com/priceoffootball. If you have a question you'd like answered on the show, email us at questions@priceoffootball.com. We will be back on Monday with our questions edition, but in the meantime, I shall hand you over to Mr. Kieran Maguire for his customary farewell.
Well, thanks once again, folks, for the feedback. Voting has now closed for the FSA awards, so we will wait to see. We're looking to come in a plucky fifth out of 4 nominees for the not quite sure what the award is prize, We're proud to be nominated, to be honest with you. But if you want to give us some support, as producer Guy says, if you can get on that Apple icon and give us 5 stars, it helps us in the ratings. If you write something, you can write something nice. You can write something not nice about us if you so desire. But I think it's the 5 stars that tends to get. You could even say you would rather it was. You could rather it was presented by was it Travis Bickle and Jedward? Travis Bickle from the great film Taxi Driver, which I saw at the weekend, played by Robert De Niro, and I think he'd be very good with Jedward. He'll be able to say, "Are you listening to me?" And I'm sure they would be, and it will take the show forwards rather than myself and Kevin.
Having spent an entire afternoon with Jedward, I would happily unleash Travis Bickle on them. And anyone else who's a wrong un. I'd have whoever the bloke from Halloween is.
Michael Myers.
Yeah. I'll tell everybody the story one day. My God, that was a tough afternoon. It's how Bill Bailey lost his hair. Were we allowed to vote, by the way? Because I completely forgot. And I think subconsciously I thought we weren't allowed to vote.
I think we were.
Oh, were we?
Yes.
That'll be one of the reasons we don't win these things then, won't it? Bye, everybody.
Bye.
The price of football. The price of football.